I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions and obviously I haven't been available for like a week or so. So, first of all, I know what you guys are going to ask and I did think it was a flagrant foul. And our just needs to be better and it's tough. Obviously, the refs are in a really difficult spot. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world in my opinion is to make calls. All you do is get yelled at the whole time by everybody. You're never winning. So I think for us as the leagues just got to do better protecting our players in that regard. I don't about being out. Feeling a lot better. Excited to get back into practice today. And then I'm feeling really positive about getting back into one of the games at the back-to-back. Obviously difficult coming back in a back-to-back. So we'll have to be cautious of that. But I feel a lot better and like I said, excited to get back into practice and this week has been very helpful for my overall health. So other than that, if you guys have any questions, I know I kind of just ranted for a while, but I'm feeling a lot. Okay, she said difficulty coming back in back-to-back. She's missing this game. There it is. The official flagrant foul acknowledgement that we have all been waiting for. And I really want you to notice exactly how she frames this entire situation because let's be honest, I knew she would make this exact type of statement because of course she did. Everyone who has been closely watching Caitlin Clark ever since her legendary Iowa days knew exactly how this entire scenario would play out in the media. The league just has to do better and we have to invest in those areas. The technology can get better. We can treat the referees a little bit better. Pay them like they're full-time employees. I think things like that. And I think a lot has obviously come after that. And as I've stood up here and said before like the harassment, the hate, none of that is okay. That goes for my opposing team. That goes for my teammates. That goes for my coaches. There should never be a question of character. Like I've always stood up here and said that and that's truly what I believe. That's how I was raised. So none of that is okay and I don't want anybody to ever experience that. I think it can be really frustrating to me at times and I think it's difficult. I think a lot of people sometimes think I'm a robot. I'm not a robot. I have emotions. I have feelings. And it can be really difficult to go through a lot of that. And I'm 24 years old trying to navigate a lot. And I think at times I know I've been in this world for 4 years now and you would never change any of it. But there are times that it is hard and there are times that it probably affects me a little bit more than I do. And I would never change any of that for the world. But I think it's important that people remember that part of it too. So, at the same time, it's really interesting to me because, even I turned the TV on Sunday and that game was on Wednesday and that's all people are still talking about. And I feel like that's just a real disservice to our league. I like it and I get it. You have to talk about it. You talk about whether it's flavoring, you talk about whatever it is, but to continue to be down. She was always going to come out and publicly condemn the hate. She was always going to take the incredibly diplomatic high road route. She was always going to think about absolutely everyone else's feelings and reputation before her own be down and then for the narrative to be taken other places that is really just not acceptable I think it's hard to see and it's a disservice to my team but it's also a disservice to the other teams in this league and other players in this league. There's so much amazing talent and there's so many amazing players that are playing at an incredibly high rate. And I remember I think it was Sunday or Saturday, whatever day it was. I remember watching them discuss it on TV and I didn't know they were going to discuss it. I was just watching the other games because I try to watch as much as I can. And I honestly felt bad for the players that were playing in the games those days. And also I felt bad for my teammates. They played on Friday and they dominated and they played really well and nobody wanted to talk about that. They were just worried about everything else. So, and there had been, I think 10 plus other games that had already happened to that point. So, I think it's all of our jobs to help refocus the narratives a lot of the times and we can do better at that and I think it'll help our GR game grow a lot more. But let's take a step back and talk about what actually happened on the court on June 1st against the Chicago Sky. In a moment that shocked everyone watching, Kennedy Carter blatantly hip-checked Clark completely away from the ball in what has to be one of the most obvious, uncalled for and flagrant off-ball fouls we have seen in professional basketball in this entire decade here. By the way, she gave exactly the statement I expected. Alright, a very canned statement. She shot down online harassment and hate. I knew she would make this statement. There was no way in with her having to play in this league with these players. There was no way she was not going to do the "I'm condemning hate and online harassment, blah blah blah." She was always going to do that. Alright? If anybody expected that she wouldn't, you were wrong. I fully expect. And you know what's even crazier? The referees on the floor didn't even call it in real time. Let that sink in. It literally took a post-game league review from the front office to step in and officially upgrade that incredibly dirty play to a flagrant one. Look, you got to say one thing. She's always thinking about everybody else but her. However, she did make it clear that it was a foul. The league needs to do better. And of course, she tried to spin it towards the rest of the league, too. But, we knew this would happen. We knew that this would be the kind of statement she would give. She's always trying to, and here's the problem. She's such an unselfish person and player in what is an unbelievably selfish league, petty league, and jealous league. And her personality could not be more opposite to her fellow players in the league. But then in the immediate aftermath, as if the physical hit wasn't enough, Carter actually posted on social media saying, "Beside three-point shooting, what does she bring to the table, man?" This right here perfectly illustrates the incredibly toxic environment Caitlin Clark is currently navigating on a daily basis. She gets physically targeted on the hardwood. The very player who committed the foul publicly mocks her on social media for the world to see. And yet, Clark's immediate response is to publicly condemn the online backlash against that exact same player. The cognitive dissonance here is honestly stunning when you really break it down and look at what's happening. Now, this is where it gets really interesting and says so much about her character. She's actively calling out the massive media circus surrounding her, but she's doing it in the most quintessential textbook Caitlin Clark way possible by completely deflecting the attention and making it all about everyone else. She actually stood at the podium and said, "I feel bad for the players that were playing in the games those days." Think about that level of selflessness for a second. She even went on to explicitly say, "I feel bad for my teammates." But let's take a hard look and examine what she's actually communicating beneath the surface here. The Kennedy Carter incident went down on a Saturday, and by Sunday morning, literally every single sports talk show, podcast, and network in America was still endlessly dissecting and discussing it on a loop. The media machine had completely taken over. As she pointed out, she'd be down and then the narrative was instantly hijacked and taken to entirely other places that had absolutely nothing to do with the actual sport of basketball. We simply cannot ever lose sight of that fundamental reason why people play sports. The joy, the competitive fire, and the pure fun. That is exactly why you pick up a basketball in the first place. You can clearly see she is trying so incredibly hard to reframe this exhausting narrative to make it all about the positive aspects of her historic rookie season. She desperately wants to focus on the sold-out arenas, the thousands of young fans, the undeniable energy, and the massive excitement she brings to the game. But then in a very vulnerable moment, she reveals something incredibly crucial when she says, "I remember seeing a headline, 'The season has been everything but fun and just full of frustration here.'" That is exactly what I fully expect to see happening right now. But let's pivot and talk about the current injury situation, because this is exactly where things get genuinely concerning for the Indiana Fever organization as a whole. She has officially confirmed the news nobody wanted to hear. She's sitting out Sunday's highly anticipated game against the Las Vegas Aces. And that specific matchup is happening right on July 2nd. But the grueling schedule doesn't stop there. Then there's a brutal back-to-back stretch coming up on July 8th against Phoenix, and then immediately turning around on July 9th to face the Mercury again. She specifically went out of her way to mention the immense physical difficulty of coming back and trying to compete in a demanding back-to-back scenario. And honestly, look, you totally get it when you see the physical toll this season has taken on her. But here is exactly what makes this entire situation so unbelievably complex and layered. Caitlin Clark is simultaneously the WNBA's single biggest financial asset and its most heavily divisive figure. And the crazy part is she didn't choose to step into either of those roles. She's the biggest asset because the raw numbers simply do not lie. When the Indiana Fever play, television viewership absolutely spikes to unprecedented astronomical levels. When she plays on the road, entire arenas sell out in a matter of minutes. Her jersey is undeniably the top seller in the entire league by a massive margin. She has successfully brought casual sports fans into the WNBA ecosystem in massive numbers that the league has never ever seen before in its history. Just look at the data. The June 23 game between Indiana and New York drew an astounding 2.3 million viewers on ABC, making it by far the most watched WNBA game in 23 entire years. But on the flip side, she's also highly divisive because her massive overnight success has completely exposed some very uncomfortable truths about how the WNBA has been marketed and covered by the media for years. The league literally spent 2 solid decades telling loyal fans that the Encore product was just as good as the NBA, aggressively pushing the narrative that the only reason for lower viewership was rooted in deep sexism and a total lack of mainstream media coverage. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Caitlin Clark shows up and suddenly the massive viewership is absolutely there. The wall-to-wall media coverage is undeniably there, but it's all intensely centered around this one single rookie player who fundamentally doesn't fit the established narrative the league had been pushing for years. And you better believe that creates some deep-seated resentment. Veteran players who have literally been grinding in this league for a decade are sitting there watching a rookie get more mainstream attention, more endorsements, and more screen time in 3 short months than they have received in their entire professional careers. They see the national media finally showing up to their games. But they know it's only for one person. They see the drastically increased financial investment, the chartered flights, and the skyrocketing revenue. But they know deep down it's not because of them. And Caitlin Clark is awkwardly caught right in the dead center of all of this intense crossfire. She didn't ask to be crowned the ultimate savior of the WNBA. She certainly didn't campaign for any kind of special treatment from the refs or the media. She just wanted to go out there and play the game of basketball at the absolute highest level. But the very moment she officially entered the professional league, she instantly became a lightning rod for literally every single unspoken tension and grievance that had been quietly building up behind the scenes for years. The blatant physical targeting she's experienced on the court is just a visible symptom of that much deeper resentment. When Kennedy Carter brutally hip-checks her to the floor, it's not just a physical basketball play gone wrong. It's a loud, deliberate statement. When Angel Reese celebrates excessively and gets right in her face after grabbing a rebound over her. It's not just normal competitive fire, it feels incredibly personal when opposing players make snarky comments in press conferences about what she actually brings to the table beyond just her three-point shooting. These critics are not just offering an honest critique of her basketball game. They are actively trying to diminish her massive overall impact on the sport. And what's truly fascinating is that Clark's response to all of this animosity has been remarkably and frustratingly consistent across the board. She continues to loudly condemn the hate from her fanbase. She continuously heaps praise on her fiercest competitors. She constantly takes the absolute highest road possible and she demands everyone just focus on the game of basketball. She absolutely refuses to make any of this about herself. But you have to ask yourself, at what point does that endlessly diplomatic approach stop being noble and start being actively self-destructive? Because the reality is, while she is out there publicly defending the very players who actively target her on the court, those same players are absolutely not returning the favor. While she's begging the national media to focus on everyone else's statistical accomplishments, those exact same players are subtly and sometimes very explicitly undermining hers at every turn. That viral comment about her desperately needing an agent who will aggressively advocate for her is completely spot on. She's currently represented by XL Sports Management, which happens to be the exact same powerful agency that represents legends like Candace Parker and several other massive WNBA stars. And sure, they are undeniably good at brand building and securing massive multi-million-dollar endorsement deals, but are they actually good at stepping up and protecting their star client from a deeply hostile and physically dangerous competitive environment? Are they aggressively pushing back behind closed doors when the league's incredibly questionable officiating allows these obviously dangerous non-basket plays to go completely uncalled for? Are they pounding the table and demanding significantly better arena security when the physical targeting on the court actively escalates week after week? These are crucial fundamental questions that are absolutely worth asking right now, because as it currently stands, Caitlin Clark is out there doing all of the heavy lifting and advocating for literally everyone else in the league, and yet absolutely nobody is stepping up and proactively advocating for her. Just think about the absolutely baffling referee situation for a second. She actually mentioned this explicitly in her press conference. She said the league has allegedly been discussing implementing better player protection rules for something like 3 entire years now, and yet absolutely nothing really changes on the actual hardwood. Think about that timeline. 3 years entirely predates her highly anticipated arrival in the WNBA. So, this completely confirms the league has been fully aware for years that blatant officiating inconsistency and dangerous unsportsmanlike plays are massive systemic problems, and they still haven't managed to fix it. Now, fast forward to today. They officially have the single biggest mainstream star in the entire history of women's basketball literally being headhunted and targeted with dirty off-ball fouls on national television. And their grand solution is what exactly? Quietly upgrading fouls to flagrant ones days after the game has already ended. Issuing generic corporate PR statements about player safety. Let me be incredibly clear, that is absolutely not protection. That is just basic public relations damage control. Real tangible protection would mean the referees actually having the guts to call those flagrant fouls in real time right in front of the massive crowds. Real protection would involve handing down actual meaningful suspensions for dangerous plays, not just slapping players with meaningless technical fouls and moving on. Real protection would be the league office drawing a firm line in the sand and making it crystal clear that intentionally targeting star players will result in severe career-impacting consequences. But here is the crux of the issue. The WNBA has literally never had to deal with a situation of this magnitude before. They've never had a player whose mainstream star power and cultural relevance was so vastly far above everyone else's that she naturally became a walking target. They've never had to carefully balance the tightrope of actively protecting their single biggest financial asset while simultaneously trying to maintain the illusion of competitive integrity. They've never had to intricately navigate the messy locker room politics of a professional league where so many veteran players openly resent the shiny new star who is single-handedly bringing in all the massive attention, the chartered flights, and the television money. And Caitlin Clark, at just 22 years old, is somehow expected to navigate all of this unprecedented chaos with perfect grace and veteran maturity, while simultaneously playing elite-level professional basketball, adjusting to the hardest league in the world, and dealing with a brutal ear infection that's already kept her sidelined and out of practice for over a week. The final poignant question she poses to the media about needing to refocus the negative narratives and getting back to helping the game actually grow is 100% the right one to ask. But it's also fundamentally incomplete. Because here is the hard truth. The media narratives won't magically refocus until the deep underlying tensions within the league are actually addressed out in the open. And those boiling tensions won't be addressed until the league office, the veteran players, and the media establishment finally sit down and have a brutally honest conversation about what is actually happening here. What's really happening is that the WNBA is experiencing completely unprecedented rocket ship levels of growth, and that growth is almost entirely resting on the shoulders of exactly one player. What's really happening is that some smart players are genuinely grateful for that rising tide, while a loud vocal contingent deeply resents exactly how and why it's happening. What's really happening is that Caitlin Clark is being physically targeted and battered in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with normal hard-nosed basketball competition. And what's really happening is that she is handling all of this immense pressure with vastly more maturity, grace, and total professionalism than anyone should ever reasonably expect from a 22-year-old rookie fresh out of college. So when she sits at that podium and plainly says, "I'm not a robot. I have genuine emotions and I have very real feelings," we all honestly need to believe her and take that to heart, because whether we want to admit it or not, she has been single-handedly carrying the immense crushing weight of an entire professional league's massive financial expectations, deep-seated veteran resentments, and awkward growing pains entirely on her own shoulders since the very second she was drafted first overall. And she's being forced to do all of this heavy lifting while constantly being told by the media establishment to just smile more, complain a little bit less, and constantly think about protecting everyone else's fragile feelings before she even considers her own. The real question we need to be asking isn't whether Caitlin Clark can handle this immense pressure. She has already proven time and time again that she absolutely can. The real question is whether the WNBA as an organization is capable of creating a healthy professional environment where she doesn't have to handle it entirely alone. An environment where the in-court officiating actually protects her physical safety. Where her fellow professional players show her a baseline level of professional respect, where the sports media covers her purely and fairly as an athlete, and where she can finally just be an elite basketball player instead of a constant exhausting cultural flashpoint. Right now, the unfortunate answer to that massive question is a resounding no. And until that answer finally becomes yes, we're going to just keep watching these exact same toxic cycles play out over and over again. Blatant physical targeting followed by a massive media circus followed by Clark taking the diplomatic high road resulting in absolutely nothing changing, and then we just hit repeat. She absolutely deserves so much better than this. The millions of new fans who are finally paying attention and tuning into the WNBA deserve vastly better than this. And frankly, the entire league as an institution deserves far better than the completely embarrassing dysfunction it is currently displaying on a national stage. So, here is the ultimate million-dollar real question we have to grapple with. Is the WNBA finally going to step up and rise to the monumental game-changing moment that Caitlin Clark has single-handedly created for them? Or is the organization going to completely squander the biggest opportunity in its entire existence simply because a handful of veteran players and bitter media members absolutely cannot get past their own deep-seated resentment based on how this wildly unprecedented season has gone so far? Honestly, looking at the track record, I'm genuinely not optimistic at all. But I truly hope for the sake of the game that I am entirely wrong. Because if the league office can finally step in and figure this out, if they can genuinely protect their franchise stars, effectively address the toxic locker room resentment, drastically improve the wildly inconsistent officiating, and just let the incredible talent on the basketball court speak for itself, then the foundation, what Caitlin Clark is currently building, could legitimately transform the entire landscape of women's basketball for generations to come. But if they completely fail to do that, if the blatant targeting on the court continues unchecked, if the exhausting media circus never actually ends, and if the palpable tensions just keep escalating week after week, then we might all look back on this exact season as the tragic moment the WNBA had absolutely everything it ever wanted right within its reach and just blindly let it slip away. All because they fundamentally couldn't manage to get out of their own way. So, what do you guys think actually happens next in this saga? Can the league office step up and fix this glaring issue before it's completely too late to salvage? Let me know your unfiltered thoughts down in the comments section below. And please make absolutely sure you're subscribed to the channel with those notifications turned on, because I can promise you right now, this insane story is still far, far from over.